Well, Pete, obviously your major success last year when you came has attracted this massive audience.
Yes.
We have before us. And I think, well...
Thanks for coming.
I was going to start by explaining who you were, but they already know.
Well, okay.
Explain again.
Explain again. All right. Tell them about how you got involved with music.
How I got involved in music?
Where did it all start?
Well, if we go right back, I think I'd be about 14. And I started playing the guitar. Just like anybody, a lot of people, should I say. I really got into music and avidly learnt the guitar. And at the age of 14, then I was really into that new wave and punk stuff that was happening when I was about, that would have been about 1980 or something like that. And then I was really into that, and then I formed a band. And then when I was about 16, I discovered folk music, and that was a total change. I really loved what I heard, and I just wanted to play the guitar and sing without a band, and just I was really into words. I think that was the driving force, I think. And when I came across folk music, and it was kind of American folk music that went back to the early 60s, I really was inspired by that. I just thought it was amazing.
So when you say you bought a guitar and you were in a band, so were you electric at that point then?
Yeah, well, I wanted to play that. I mean, I learned to play the guitar on this Spanish guitar that was in the house, and I learned, I used to play lots of Beatles, learned through Beatles songs, and also, you know, starting off originally with House of the Rising Sun and Streets of London and things like that, just to learn the first chords. I had this friend who taught me how to play a little bit, helped me out.
And you said you got involved in folk music, but it's not finger in the ear stuff, is it? What you play are your own songs in the main.
Yeah. I mean, people have different definitions of what folk music is, and because it's got so many different branches of it. Some people think it's something that's closer to, you know, American culture and Americana or country or something like that, and it's a songwriting culture. Or over here, you've got something, as you've just suggested, being English traditional or British traditional, and getting all the usual stereotypical, you know, things of finger in the ear and Aaron sweaters and stuff, which has died away now, thank goodness. But I was never into that too much. I went through phases of being really into it, and learnt a lot of songs, and it became really influential in my songwriting. But I always wanted to be a songwriter.
We'll change how we're going to start because of the... Let's start with there's a particular traditional song associated with you, which is Farmer's Boy.
The Farmer's Boy, yeah.
Now, tell us how you got to that first of all. Why did that become your folk song?
The Farmer's Boy is one that I came across, just thought, what a great song. And I was amazed how such a plain, simple story it was, with a happy ending. And a song which I thought, oh, this is a great traditional song, and I learnt it. And then I found out that nobody did it anymore, because it was viewed as being a song which was, you know, had been done too much or was too popular to a lot of people. But to me, I'd never heard it, really. I think I might have heard it, I wasn't sure, but I was, to me it was new. And so I became the only person doing it, because everybody else was avoiding it, I think. And I loved the song so much, and then I ended up for a very long time actually always finishing gigs with it. And that's how I ended up sort of like it becoming a regular song in my set, really.
And you're now doing, what do you call it, this new thing you're doing? Luddite
sampling. Well, it's they're kind of talking blues, or their raps, or their rants. I don't know what I'd call them, but I write a lot of words, and I make them the verses, and then I take a traditional chorus like that one, So it's like a new song, and then it has this kind of sample, which is from a traditional folk song. So that's basically that.
And of course, in a club, what would happen is people would join in with the chorus, so they're a live sample.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. So it's when I say Luddite, it means it's all, you know, back to.
Did you know who the Luddites were?
Yeah, that's a good point.
Right. You or me?
Well, yeah, they wanted to hold back progression in farming technology, wasn't it? Or it was
weaving.
Weaving particularly. This would be the 17th century.
1770. Yeah.
1770. And they were a protest against more equipment coming in to the workplace to actually put them out of work, which carries on today, of course. Mm-hmm. But you know, and we don't do anything about it anymore. But in those days, it was a matter of life and death. And so the Luddites came along because it was led by a man. I think he was from Huddersfield, wasn't he, or somewhere around there, who actually was called. What was his first name?
Ned Ludd.
Ned Luddite.
Ned Ludd.
Ned Ludd. That's right. Yeah. So him and his followers became known as Luddites because they were resisting all this progression in mechanicalisation. But we use the term nowadays as meaning someone who is technologically phobic, for example. That can be used in a sort of, so it shifted a little bit. It means somebody who wants things to remain just really basic and sort of like, you know, just not involved in too much technology or progression. You know, so when I say a Luddite sampler, I mean it's just like all I'm getting is to people to join in the chorus. I'm not actually sampling any music on any decks or anything like that. So it's a kind of it's just a bit of a joke to mean the opposite, really.
I'm able to ask you things that I wouldn't do normally because it's a small audience and we've seen you talk before. So, why are you a man who is driven by bizarre projects?
I'm driven by bizarre projects.
Yes, you've always got some. Let's just go through one or two of the things.
Okay.
Well, the first bizarre project was your pantomime that you took on tour, which was based around Farmer's Boy, actually.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah. Yeah.
That was an odd idea because it was.
That was a Christmas show.
Yeah. Yeah, well, it's pantomime.
Of course.
Oh
yeah,
no, it isn't.
pantomime.
Oh yes, it is.
Yeah.
So how did that come about? Because you kind of it wasn't a touring show. You recruited people.
I did, yes, yeah. And we went round and did a folk club tour in just 1 year in December, and I got lots of people to act different parts. Made up a story, got a script together. It wasn't the best of scripts, but it was a lot of fun, and it all was based around the story of the farmer's boy. The farmer's boy story, to put you in the picture, is a very plain story of a young boy walking up a farm track. They believe it goes back to about the time of probably the Napoleonic Wars or something. This is one theory. And there was a lot of starving in England, lots of no work for the farmers, and he's looking for a job, for the farm workers, I should say. And he's looking for a job, and he comes to the farmyard, doesn't he? And then he asks for a job, and he's just about to walk away because the farmer's told him to clear off. And the daughter comes to the door just at that moment, and she pleads with the father for him to stay. And he ends up, through the years, marrying the farmer's daughter and getting the farm. So it's just a very plain story, but there's just something about it which caught my imagination. So that was project number one, wasn't it?
And then, what came next? Was it the multilingual album? Was that?
Yeah, possibly. Yeah, yeah, yeah. That was a mad project where I was just. Well, I've always been into languages a bit, though typically English. I'm not very good at speaking any of them, but I enjoy the connection. I enjoy the connection between all the words and the European kind of tapestry, especially, as well as that ended up to be 10 languages around the world, really, and I had a teacher for each one, and it was a lot of fun. So that one was a bit mad.
Actually, can you do Malinka?
Malaika, nakupinda malaika. Malaika, nakupinda malaika. Namini fanya J, kijana mwenzio, nakin wajamana sinaway, nakawinda malaika, pesa, nakobinda malaika. Like, I can't remember it very well, actually. Well, it's funny how pesa is the word for money. I just thought that was probably left by the Portuguese.
Almost certainly. Anybody know what language that was?
Swahili, wasn't it? Yeah.
Swahili.
Yeah.
Just a little test of knowledge. So Pete made an album, 10 songs, all sung in foreign language as well. Is Welsh foreign? I don't know.
Is Welsh foreign? Well, that's open to debate, isn't it? What do you think?
Well, you actually think everybody spoke Welsh and we should have signs right across the country that translate from Welsh into English. But
well, and every other language as well, a few other languages. Just because languages are good for you, good for the brain. No, I think I think Welsh is a foreign language. It's so different, isn't it? I mean, it's more different than even though it has all the connections there and it's fascinating. It's more different than French or German, for example. So. And they're classed as foreign, so even though it's just the other side of Herefordshire, it's a foreign language.
And I suppose it was a progression from doing things in different languages to doing things in an early version of English.
Yeah, I think that there was the same thing niggling me. I think I really wanted. I think what got me doing the languages project was a love of English and the origin of English. The history of English, that to me is very exciting, and you know, I just loved if there was a sound machine, if somebody had recorded something in 14th century England, I'd be the first one to want to hear it. You know, I just think it's absolutely amazing where words, how they've changed, if they've changed, you know, and vowel sounds and also where their origin, you know, the etymology of language. I mean, it's just fascinating to me. So that's how I ended up getting into the Chaucer, Geoffrey Chaucer, 14th century England.
Do you know about Geoffrey Chaucer?
He wrote the book with all the stories.
Yeah, the Canterbury Tales. Well done.
Yeah, that's him.
Oh, so what Pete had was that, you know, Chaucer was famous for writing these stories. Well, actually he didn't write them. He got them from other places, often different languages, and he put them together as if a bunch of people who were going from London to Canterbury were travelling, you know, in this great train of horses, and whenever they stopped they told each other stories, and so it was this book which just linked together these stories. Well, that's one idea, but Pete had this idea that Geoffrey Chaucer had a son who was called
Geoffrey Chaucer Jr.
and he didn't discover these
he
didn't discover these stories, he discovered songs and he collected those together. Is there one you could do a little bit of?
Yeah, sure.
Because you know modern music, rock and roll, began in America, yeah, and then we learnt it and the Beatles happened, and you know, up to where we are today. And in fact, the first thing that Pete did, which was based on something called talking blues, is a very early form of pop music from the start of the last century, which came out of standard blues and is the root of rap music today. And so what Pete discovered was that these songs weren't really American at all. They go back to old England.
They do, yeah. So it's all this bit of fun, this fantasy I embarked upon, and I mean, I always thought, well, wouldn't it be fun to mess around with the vowel sounds of, because we're taught when studying Chaucer, though no one was there, so no one knows, but it's usually quite a thick dialect, which is very different from modern speech. So for example, it'd be "Wan the April and the showers of Suter and the drought of March has pierced to the rota," like that.
Did that make sense? Did
that make any sense? There you go. That's how far it's changed. Sorry?
It sounded slightly Welsh.
I thought you said deranged, actually. Well, maybe there was something in there, and you can hear bits of Geordie in there, and you can hear bits of Scots, and you can hear bits of things which are just probably regional, but it's sort of modern English has just moved on to such a degree that it's too far removed for us to understand it. And so it was the sounds I was interested. So I actually sort of like would mess around just as. It's funny you bringing up this project as part of the interview because it's making me very conscious that I'm completely mad. That I'm totally bonkers. Maybe that's the.
Yes.
Maybe that's your idea, isn't it? 1, 2, 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock a rock, 4, 6, 7 o'clock and 8 o'clock a rock, noon, 10, 11 o'clock, 12 o'clock a rock, and this night we shall rock. About to the clock, wearing your bestest smock, you tip it on. There be much mirth when the chimes rung one. This neat rock, about to the clock, and we shall rock a rock a rock until the crowing cock. This big we shall rock about to the clocker and rock. And that's a little example, but of course you might have heard Rock Around the Clock, you have, haven't you? Which is, you know, thought of as being one of the first popular rock and roll songs by Bill Haley. So that sort of thing I did. And then I didn't just do 50s, I did a kind of history of the 4 or 5 decades. And yeah, and went completely mad. Yeah. And then Nigel, you actually came and
yes,
played a DJ.
I was a DJ who interviewed this bizarre person from the 15th century live on stage, which was
yeah,
we
did a couple of really good gigs, didn't we?
We did, yes.
Yeah.
We did a literature festival, which is, well, a storytelling festival.
Yes, we did. Yeah.
I don't think they had any idea what to make of it, but
yeah, I think they enjoyed it. Yeah. So that was another project.
And then you're writing your own songs and putting together your own. Why are so many of your songs about cafes? Is that a place you write a lot?
Cafes?
Yeah.
Cafes.
Watching the world go by.
Yeah. There's a couple which I ended up doing last night at a gig, and there was one where I do end up in a cafe sort of looking out the window, and then I sang, the next song I sang actually was based in a cafe in a greasy spoon. What we call it, you know, a sort of like sausage, egg and chips, egg and bacon sort of cafe. And but I don't spend all my time in cafes, if that's what you're thinking. That sort of like
you spend time in zoos.
Zoos, yeah, various locations. Songs have been inspired. A zoo, a pub, a post office, a hospital. Yeah, location's important.
You've always been something of a free spirit. I remember once asking somebody where you lived, and they went, you know, wherever he is at the moment, because you did sort of travel around, and every time we saw you, it seemed a different home.
Yes, I was never any good at settling down, really. It wasn't for want of trying, you know. I'd stay somewhere at least 6 months. I'd have an address for about 6 months. But I've always been always wanted to perform, always enjoyed the travelling, meeting people, always enjoyed that kind of lifestyle. So I mean, it suited me. So I just carried on, and I always felt it suited me being on my own as well and being the folk singer. So that's the way I've kind of you know.
You were going to move to the Netherlands at one point.
I've had lots of funny ideas. Yes, I've got a lot of friends over there, and I spend a lot of time there, and enjoy trying to learn the language and do a lot of gigs there. But not so much now. I just tend to base myself in the UK and just nip across to do like maybe a weekend in somewhere like that, because I'm a family man now, you see, so I've settled down at long last.
I was wondering, you see, you've been somebody who could go where you like, spend time writing songs, but you've now got a small person to consider.
Yes, little Arthur, he's 2 months old. Well, yeah, it's just wonderful, and it fits in well if I just carry on and working in the UK and just going away and doing my gigs, like 2 gigs, 2 nights away or something. That's okay. I don't, you know, I miss him, and Miss Victoria, but you know, that's about maximum.
What about the writing? Because obviously, if you're on your own, you can take yourself off or shut your door. And
well, it's funny that I don't think I found the travelling more of an obstacle to writing than if you were in one place. Because when I had the time of just being in one place, then I'd write more. And I mean, quite recently, I went over just before the baby was born. I made this point of actually going away and spending a whole week of just writing stuff, and that's where I got a lot of the ideas for the for the folk song choruses and the rap sort of songs. So I wrote those all in one place, and that was kind of you know, I knew what I was doing. I wasn't distracted by other things, you know. So it was. I tend to write better in those situations.
Given that you write stuff for yourself, why do you write so many words? It must make it hard. I mean, it's a lot to learn when you write a song.
I think I love the sound. I think there's rhythm involved, and there's all these half rhymes. There's all these things. I think I enjoy that. I enjoy it. I don't think. I mean, is it taxing on an audience? Let me ask you. I mean, when you, because there's so many, for example, like rap and talking blues, or just songs that have a lot of, you know, sort of what they call that really fast sort of knitting machine sort of technique. You know, I really enjoy it. That's why I tend to do it. And listening to songs that do that, I find them really enjoyable. You know, they're kind of full of half rhymes, and they're full of, you know, I even remember, you know, the man of messages himself is viewed as the, you know, the spokesman of a generation, Bob Dylan. I remember him even saying in an interview that words are more to do with the sound and the rhythm and the shapes than they're actually their meaning, you know. And then you get things like where a lot of modern pop rock actually went into this thing where where lyrics became really kind of nebulous, you know, like Michael Stipe of R.E.M., you know, where you just don't know what he's on about, you know. And people actually say, though, they actually sounds really beautiful, and you can dissect the lyrics and work out, he does mean, and he might explain it in an interview. But but when you're hearing it, I mean, there's no chance of anybody knowing what he's going on about, you know, but it sounds beautiful. And then there's a lot of that. And I mean, even somebody as popular as like U2, you know, it doesn't matter. It's more to do with the sound, isn't it? And then you get the ultimate sort of disgrace, I find it. You know, they're accused of killing rock and roll. A Coldplay, I just find them the extreme. They're the real bad area. I don't like them at all, you know, because you've got that thing where you don't think, well, what's he on about at all? And they actually say, well, it's to do with the sound, it's to do with the music, it's to do with creating something beautiful, the whole thing, which is fair enough. So maybe your actual real meaning is not. I might be moving away from your question a little bit, but it may be not that important in it. It's to do with creating, you know. It's to do with rhythm, isn't it? It's to do with actually patterns and things a lot of the time, and that, you know, working with music and working with words. So to answer your question, it's like I like to cram them in and just like I like to build up and mess around with words.
But it's a lot to learn. That's where I began.
That was the question.
Yeah.
Sorry, I go off on one.
Just to drag you back.
I've got so much I want to say, and I missed the question. Yes, it is.
So how do you go about? You've written a song. I mean, let's take the thing that closes your new album, which is it 9 minutes long, something like that?
Yeah. Right. Yeah, the Talking Blues.
Yeah, but and it's all just words and words. How do you remember it? I mean,
well,
how do you set about saying, I'm going to learn this whole thing so I can repeat performances of it?
Well, I think there's two things going on. I think first of all is that since a very early age, I've just really trained my mind to learn songs. I've always learnt songs, and I've always learnt a lot of ballads, traditional ballads. I've always learnt a lot of story songs. I've always been into words and singing words, you know, singing stories, should I say, or making a message. So I'm enthusiastic. So that tends to help you remember them. And if you just walk around the room playing them, and if you play them, you learn them quicker because you actually you're using your singing side of your brain as opposed to your talking side of your brain. So you're not sort of like having to recite. You're not learning just the words. So that makes it easier. But the other side is that you're quite right. You have to sit down and learn them as well. So, but as I say, you have a bit of a head start if you're really enthusiastic about it, you know.
Because the thing about Talking Blues is it's meant to sound improvised, even though every performance is probably the same set of words. It's a strange form.
Yeah, it is a strange form. And Talking Blues, has any of you ever heard of Talking Blues? Yeah, because it's a form which gets associated with a guy in the 1940s and 50s, a guy called Woody Guthrie, who for that form of folk music, American folk music, he gets the stamp of being it's his thing. But he probably got it further back than that, and it comes from probably a lot of different strands, probably a lot from
Blind Willie Johnson particularly.
Yeah, and John Lee Hooker was doing it, and he learned from a lot of the. They used to sort of do it in the churches as well, didn't they? And it has a kind of heritage of sort of like through Black America, and that's where he got it. And then it became something that got further into sort of protests, didn't it, through the 50s and 60s, and what became sort of like the protest movement of the early 60s. And then people like Bob Dylan were doing it, and it just became a. And then there's Arlo Guthrie, his son, used to do it, didn't he? Woody Guthrie's son, and lots of people used to do them.
And it became rap.
Phil
I
Oaks
mean,
did them.
There's no doubt that.
Well, the rap thing is interesting because they're obviously related at some point, but I think they've gone through totally different sort of things. But they're obviously related at source.
There was this chap in the 1940s and 50s called Lord Buckley, who was a white guy, but he played black music, and he. Do you know Lord Buckley's stuff?
No, he was
Black Cross and the Nas, and he did these raps. You know, he invented the form. He used the word first of all, and he would tell stories using Black American language, and a lot of people thought he was a black performer. And most rappers will trace what he did, because he would have singers on stage who were singing bits of songs that went along.
His name was Lord Buckley.
Lord Buckley.
Right, I've got to check him out. This is serious.
Yeah.
I've heard the name. I know he was associated with doing. I didn't know that though.
Well, check out the Black Cross, which is a story of a chap called Hezekiah Jones, who was a plantation worker.
Right. Okay.
There was a man once called Hezekiah Jones. He lived on a farm. On the farm, he kept chickens.
Oh yeah,
that one.
Yeah.
And eventually, the people of the town come round, and because he's black and reads books, they decide that he's a bad man, and they tell him that he's a sinner, and they said, you don't know how to behave. And he says, if I can remember it, I believe a man should be good, not because of the fear of the Lord, not because of the fear of hellfire, but because he loves his neighbour. And the white folks round looked at him and said, well, there's a lot of good ways for a man to be wicked. And they hung Hezekiah just as high as a pigeon. White folks around said, well, son of a bitch had it coming to him. And that was what a guy was doing in the 1940s. And that, combined with the Talking Blues, gave us the basis of rap. Give him a little taste of Talking Blues.
Oh yeah.
Stop me reciting bizarre old things.
No, that's amazing.
That, by the way, was by the actor Paul Newman's father.
Was it?
Yeah.
You always learn loads, don't you, when you listen to Nigel?
Probably not.
This is a very Talking Blues riff, because that's what a lot of them. They used to have just like these hammering down on the bass strings and just have this little bit of music underneath where you just talk. I mean, just by the fact that I start talking and I just start talking all the time like this means that you're actually creating a Talking Blues just like that. And as Nigel said, it gives the impression of it being improvised, even though you've got some sort of script going on underneath. But it's impossible to do it the same every time. And then you can stop in the middle and you can have a conversation, you can make yourself a curry or make yourself a cup of tea. Or you can sing it every now and then, or you can go back to the script. Because I know you're all waiting with great anticipation, all four of you. I was thinking of the days when time was different. Down by the changing river, would have sat down here and not moved as I tried to forget about that lass from Liverpool. Not bothered by information or sophistication, just me and the moon in the solitude. So I wrote this ballad. Maybe it's a sentence salad, but I'm gonna sing it anyway. Oh yeah, you see I'm governed by strange anxiety, pestered by the need to be this thing in this disposable society that doesn't last, doesn't have a past, gets used, abused, gets thrown away like old news, like a numerical existence for a component for a few, just a few people to make money, that's all. For example, the other day I lost my phone. It was the happiest for ages. I was alone. No one knew where I was. I was anonymous because I was no longer in the roaming cages. I was invisible, like a fugitive, and the satellite didn't know where I lived. Couldn't find me. Yippee! You found me out. I'm nothing but a hippie. I breathed a sigh of relief until I crossed the street, and I realised the camera had seen me taking a pee in the doorway of a Barclays bank. Barclays were a Quaker family once. Try and get your head around that one, son, in the middle of a song. When did it all go wrong? And then me phone went. It was in the lining of my jacket from a hole in me pocket all the time, next to my jersey. I was hoping it was going to be one of my heroes from the past, but it wasn't. No, it was her from the Mersey. Tried to speak, but all I heard was car sirens, shop alarms, emergency services, ringtones, hydraulic seats. Oh, we're living in the age of the bleep. I was thinking of the days when time was different, down by the changing river. Thinking of the days before that big steam train came right through here, right through here, right through here. I think I'll ask Nigel if he wants any more of this Talking Blues. Nigel, do you want any more of this Talking Blues?
I'm going to ask Fish a question.
Sure.
Fish, when you do radio, what you like to do is to have a set of notes and busk around them. So tell us why, because that obviously relates to the sort of thing as we do.
Because I find it easier.
So why is it easier? Because it, well, go on.
Well, I'm just trying to find out exactly what you do. What is it?
It's more bullet points and a full script.
Oh right, okay. So you do that. You're a DJ, and then you have that underneath, and then you what are you doing over the top? Am I following this?
Okay.
Yeah.
Radio DJ we're talking about.
Yeah.
Not club DJ.
Yeah. Oh right. Okay.
Well, when you're able not to have to follow a script, you can use your own voice, can't you? And so therefore we get something much more natural. Now, do you think what Pete's doing sounds more natural than singing a song?
Yeah.
Is it something any of you chaps have encountered before, that kind of approach? All right. I'm going to move on to Francis now. Francis, you know you did a show about black music.
Yeah.
And I said you should really explore the roots. Well, Pete has got a brilliant song about the roots of black music.
Oh,
and it's got a strange history, hasn't it? Because it's actually a French song.
It's a French song that was translated by a friend of mine. It's actually called 100 Years and More, and it's about black Americans first being taken over from Africa, and of course then they're being slaves for a long time, and then 100 years, even though they were free, they were still treated as, you know, not second class, third class citizens or whatever. And so the song 100 Years and 100 More is actually saying you had 100 years of slavery, then you had 100 years of this kind of thing where they were just, you know, sort of hounded and treated as, like, you know, slaves still, you know, because slavery didn't just end after the Civil War, did it? I mean, it was carried on. So this French guy, Francis Gabrel, wrote this song about the blues players that we owe so much to. It's a kind of honour to just actually giving the thumbs up of actually saying these are the guys who actually created rock and roll, because without them, rock and roll would not have come about. And there's so much. There's a there's and that goes through not just rock and roll, but a lot of folk music and country music too. For example, there is the show which Nigel does, which is the Carter Family, where the father actually went round collecting songs, and like a lot of people of his day, he actually put his own name to them, didn't he, and sort of like just said they were his. But a lot of them actually were black country songs, which is a form which has just kind of been taken out of history altogether. You know, you just think of country songs and you think of it as a kind of you don't think of it as, but he was actually collecting these songs from people on the plantations and all sorts. And
what was really interesting, the guy that Pete's talking about is a chap called A.P. Carter.
Yeah.
And he was around in the 1920s, and he found these songs that other people sang and so fiddled with them a bit and said he'd written them. But he was great at remembering words. He could go and hear somebody sing a song and come away with all the words. He couldn't carry a tune in a handbag. So in order to remember the tunes, because this is before recording, you know, he couldn't just pick up a little recorder and point it at people. And so he made friends with this chap called Elsley Riddle, great name, who was black. Now, okay, that's sounds perfectly straightforward today, but in the 1920s in America, a black guy and a white guy going round together was, first of all, very strange. And there were a lot of places where they couldn't both go. Toilets, parks, restaurants. And so what would happen is they'd go to somebody's house, and if it was a white family, they'd let A.P. Carter into the house to hear the song, then they'd come outside and sing it to Elsley Riddle to get the tune. If it was a black family, they'd let Elsley Riddle in to hear the song, and then he'd come out and say, that's a good song, and then they'd sing it again, and A.P. Carter would remember the words. And, you know, they did a lot to battle prejudice. Actually, who's in the chorus of this song? Let's just talk about one or two of the people.
Yeah, Son House.
Right. Son House, great name, isn't it? Son House was one of the first people to have the idea that if you took a guitar and you wired it up and put it through speakers, you could get a whole different set of sounds. And what he did to do that was he took a telephone to pieces and he used a microphone inside a telephone and he wired it into a radio which he used to carry around with him, and he'd dump this down and he'd start playing and he got a strong so every time you hear an electric guitar, it's this guy who didn't know you shouldn't do that. I mean, it's a bit suicidal, hardwiring a telephone pickup in. And
it's amazing though, isn't it?
And his other nickname, you know, so it would say appearance in that Son House, and underneath it would say lightning strings, because if you wired it up wrong, when you hit the strings, you got sparks flying off. And that name was picked up by somebody else called Lightning Hopkins. I think, is he also in?
He's not in the song, no.
No, and you know, he liked that idea of music being lightning. Who else is in there?
Well, the chorus is a list of people. Son House, Charlie Patton is the second one.
Right, Charlie Patton was a very early 1920s, one of the first black artists to be recorded, and sold a lot of records, and famously was involved in the Mississippi floods of 1927. When basically the Mississippi was filling up and was going to flood the town of New Orleans, as happened 2 or 3 years ago, and big business were worried that their oil rigs and their businesses would get damaged, and so the American government opened the dams that held the Mississippi further upriver, and they flooded, I think it was 5,000 square miles of land, and destroyed all the farms. And a lot of what they destroyed in upper Mississippi were the homes of where these blues singers had lived and eked a living out the land, and that's why a lot of them had to turn to making music. And Charlie Patton was one of the first to do that. Who else?
Who's in? Blind Blake.
Oh, Blind Blake. Blind Blake's interesting. Blind Blake's mum was a prostitute. He grew up in a brothel. Like most brothels, they had a piano to entertain the people while they were waiting. And one day the piano caught fire. The story is that somebody who was smoking a cigar spilled a bottle of whiskey and then dropped his cigar in. And there was a famous picture of this guy playing the piano as it goes up in flames. And without the music, they thought they'd lose the customers, which says not a lot for what the brothel was probably really selling, but there you go. And Blind Blake borrowed a guitar and started to play piano tunes on the guitar and invented what's called the ragtime guitar, which is a style that lots and lots of players use, and it's a style that Elvis Presley copied when he first started playing, so he's quite important.
So they're all this, it's a list of inventors basically, the inventors of like the sort of very fledgling sort of the beginning of rock and roll, isn't it?
Is Robert Johnson in there?
Robert Johnson. The next one though is Willie Dixon. Willie Dixon, he wrote all the songs. He was a great songwriter, Willie Dixon. Yeah,
Willie Dixon was unusual in that he played bass, but he wrote all the old rhythm and blues songs that you may have come across, the old sort of rhythm and blues, the stuff we've talked about in the past. You'll find that Willie Dixon wrote them. He's a great songwriter. And when the Rolling Stones, who were big fans of black American music, went to Chicago, they wanted to go to the Chess Studios. Chess was a big recording studio that recorded all the blues artists. And they went, and the girl sitting at the reception welcomed them, and they said, "Oh, we're from England with the Rolling Stones. We've had a hit with a song called Little Red Rooster, which was first on Chess, and we wanted to come to the place where it was first recorded." And she said, "Oh, well, that's interesting, because the man who wrote it's my father." And it was Willie Dixon's daughter. And they said, "Oh, we'd love to meet him. Where is he?" Expecting to be shown, you know, some nice house that he got from all his royalties and things. And they said, "Oh, that's him out there." And he was sweeping the yard. And they paid him a few dollars for writing the song, and then they owned it. And so people like Willie Dixon,
amazing, isn't it?
You know, and you were saying the slavery thing, that you know, it continued that way.
Yeah. The next one, notice they're all blokes so far. We have a lady in there, don't we? Ma Rainey.
Ma Rainey and Beethoven once unwrapped a bed roll. Ma Rainey. She was 6'2". Her proudest boast was that she could knock out two men at the same time, one with each hand. And he's known to have done it. And she was, when blues was first recorded, although we think of it as being guys, as the song suggests, the first people to be recorded were lady singers. And Ma Rainey was one of those. And she's quite important in the history of music in that she gave Bob Dylan his first paid job recording. And if you ever have time, have a look at, there's an album by Bob Dylan called New Morning, and on the back of it is a picture of this little sort of midget looking figure, which is Bob Dylan, and this huge woman next to him.
Ma Rainey.
And that's Ma Rainey. And, and she taught him what to do in a studio. This sort of scared little kid.
Yeah. And then the next one is probably I would say the most famous of them all, isn't he? A lot of people refer to it, especially as referred to in Oh Brother Where Art Thou. If you ever seen that film, at the crossroads, so they changed his name slightly, who'd made his pact with the devil, hadn't he? Sold his soul to the devil, and that was Robert Johnson.
Robert Johnson is a really important writer, performer, figure in music. He only made 29 recordings, 2 sessions, recorded in hotel rooms by a guy collecting songs. And Robert Johnson he wasn't a star, he was incredibly shy. He was so shy that when the guy recorded him, he sat in the corner of the room facing the wall because he didn't like people watching him perform, which is a bit difficult if you're going to be a performer. And he arrived with a guitar once as a young kid of, I think 19, and told people he wanted to be a blues man, and just got laughed at by all these experienced blues singers who went, "Play us something," and they just started laughing at him. And then he vanished for about 8-9 months. When he came back, he had written these astonishing songs which, you know, bands still play today. If you listen to any metal band, if you listen to Led Zeppelin or anybody like that, if you listen to the Foo Fighters, right, they are playing Robert Johnson songs, not inspired by it, actually playing the songs he wrote back in for these two sessions. He was also the best blues guitarist that anybody had ever heard, and still is. And he'd acquired this amazing singing voice. And when people say, what did you do? How did you do that? He had a very simple answer. At midnight, he had gone to a crossroads where he had met the devil, and he had sold his soul to the devil, and the devil would claim his soul in 3 years. And 3 years to the day he was murdered. And nobody knows where his grave is, and nobody knows why he was murdered, and all we have left of him are these 29 recordings. But it's one of the legendary stories from the history of music, and people refer to the Crossroads one. And in fact, he wrote a song called Crossroads Blues, which is about it. And near the end of his life, before the second recording, he wrote a song called Hellhound on My Trail, when he realised what he'd done. And the hellhound is this thing that he's invented that is coming after him to take his soul away. Which,
How was he murdered?
Right. Shot, stabbed and poisoned by 3 separate people. He was poisoned, he staggered out, a man accosted him and stabbed him 4 times. He staggered further down the street and somebody shot him.
Sounds suspicious if you ask me.
Yeah.
Hired him to do it.
What? So what?
Oh, it's kind of career move.
A career move. Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
That's what he did. He didn't die young. That's why you're not a legend. That's the career move.
Does that work? What is that the same with Jim Morrison and Kurt Cobain and
Isn't that all like the same age?
Hank Williams?
It is. It's 27. A lot of these people, Kurt Cobain, Jim Morrison,
Yeah, they're all 27.
Robert
aren't
Johnson,
they? Yeah.
Buddy Holly, were all 27 when they died. Hope I die before I get old, as Pete Townsend once said.
Yeah, as Roger Daltrey says. Now he's fishing.
Yes.
What? And then Howlin' Wolf. Howlin' Wolf is the next one.
Howlin' Wolf is interesting. He was Howlin' Wolf was huge, physically huge, and he loved playing kids' songs. He's a very, very, very gentle man, and he was also a businessman, which was unusual for a blues artist. So he signed deals where he got paid for when his records got sold, and he got paid for his songs. And there was another singer called Big Bill Broomsey around at the time, and they once had a big argument, and they decided to settle it with a duel, right? And they went to the bank, and they drew out dollar bills or dollar notes, starting with a $1 note and ending with the biggest note you could get, which was a $5,000 note. And the duel was to each burn. First of all, they burnt a $1 note, then they burnt a $5 note, and the duel was to see who would chicken out first. And
That's great.
and Howlin' Wolf won because he burnt the $5,000 note. That's an interesting story about
That's
him.
fantastic.
And he also
Should we do that now? Should we have a duel? Anybody got any money on them? Right.
didn't work with coins. And
Look, he's willing to do it. Look, here we go.
yeah, I knew he would. Yeah.
Oh, is that as far you were going? Okay.
Well, Fish probably has a lighter, so you're okay. Oh.
Oh.
Can't get 50s anymore, so I'm sort of stuck there.
And then the last one, I don't know whether you got a story for. There's only one more, guys, of these blues singers. So it would be unfair to leave him off, and that's Blind Lemon.
Oh yes.
Blind Lemon Jefferson was his full name.
Blind Lemon Meringue. Yeah. His real name was Lemon Jefferson.
Was that his first name, Lemon?
Yeah. And it's really interesting because it kind of brings the whole thing round. Because you know from Middle English what lemon means.
Oh, it means darling, doesn't
Beloved.
it? Beloved.
And his mother, who was quite well read, or quite well heard, she'd listen to people talking, she listened to radio, and she liked this Old English word, lemon, which means beloved one. But she didn't realise that in Old English it's Lemain, but she thought it was Lemon, so he was christened Blind Lemon Jefferson, and he was, like a lot of blues players, he was blind. If you were a blind man and you were black, you know, there was no state benefit, there was nothing to support you. The only hope you had was to play music.
How come so many people are blind? What are they?
A lot of it was malnutrition. You know, they just didn't have a proper diet when they were young, or they got an eye infection. I mean, even today.
There is also sorry to interrupt, but there's also the theory of to do with bad alcohol, isn't there?
Yes.
Causing sort of.
Moonshine.
Yeah, just all that kind of thing. Yeah, and just badly sort of brewed. Probably sort of like, you know, really potent stuff that you should just creosote your fence with, basically, not do anything else with. Sorry, anyway.
And it's interesting that the song puts Blind Lemon Jefferson and Howlin' Wolf at them, because they are people who moved to live in Europe. Because by living in Europe, they could get work, they could get paid properly. They didn't experience the sort of prejudice they had in America. You know, venues they couldn't go to, places they couldn't go to, transport they couldn't use. You know, in 5 states in the southern states of America until 1969, a black man couldn't use a drinking fountain in the park. They had signs on it that said whites only, and they came to Britain and they discovered people who loved their music and appreciated them as human beings, and so they moved on. In fact, one of the most famous ones lived in Halifax.
Did he?
Yeah.
Who was that?
Just try to remember his name. It will come back to me. I said at the end of the session I'd throw the questioning opening to the floor, and I expected rather more people to be here, but I'm going to give you a chance. Oh, Ruth.
I've got one question for you. To my knowledge, you've recorded 3 CDs, maybe more. Could you just tell us about your experience of sound recording?
Yes, I've recorded a lot more than that, actually. I've recorded in all, including with different people, probably about 12 things I've been involved in. For a long time, I was with a label where it was a folk label, a small folk label, and they recorded my stuff very kind of. I've never enjoyed being recorded. I've never enjoyed it. And even though I stayed with that label for a very long time, they were very technically superb. Really, that was what they were really into, and but for some reason, the music, the recording never came alive to me in those recordings, and so that, for me, the balance wasn't right between technology and actually whatever it is that makes it sound like it's live, because I'm a live performer more than anything. I mean, I'd love to. I mean, I mentioned Luddites earlier on. I do. There is a part of me that would love not to actually live in a world where you just where people just played instruments and everything was instantaneous, you know. And now it's got to the extreme where recording is so much the opposite to that, where you can actually make things sound absolutely perfect, even though it's not humanly possible to do that. So my experience of recording has always been something that I've had to do, as opposed to something in that I've wanted to do, and I understand it as being something which is so, you know, it's part and parcel of surviving as a musician, of trying to earn a living from it, and also just what we all do. And it's, you know, I always remember when I first started, actually, how wonderful it was that you actually made your first record, you know. And I remember I made my first one just came out on vinyl, and it was just like, it was like you'd crossed over on, you'd achieved something. It was like being given this award or something. It's like, and then you could go out and show it off to people, and you were proud of it. Now we live in a world where absolutely everyone can make a CD. People can make a CD in their bedroom on a computer, and everybody does it. And I mean, there's nothing wrong with it. But that's the world we live in, and it's just changed so much, and it's and it's an overload of of something, technology, information, everything, which is totally different from a lot of the time of why I play and what it's all about to me. It seems to be quite the opposite. I hope that answers some of the question.
Chaps, anything you'd like to? Francis is sort of doing that as if he's about to come up with a question, but go ahead. If it's something you'd like to ask, Francis, go ahead. Don't be shy.
Oscar, you know, like, because you know, some of your songs are mostly about rap music. Do you enjoy, doing rap music as well? I mean, if you're singing.
Yeah, I've only just got into it, so I've only just got into listening to hip hop stuff, really, and really enjoying it. And I want to be influenced, but I'm doing it deliberately as a sort of research, because you know, that has not been my world until recently. But I just want to get under the skin of what it is and understand it and get some sort of connection with it. And I'm really enjoying it. Like yesterday, I heard this guy from South London called Doc Rotten. Have you heard him? Yeah, and I just love the song, and I love, again, it's back to the question about, you know, learning a lot of lyrics and cramming in a lot of words and really enjoying actually just cramming in a lot of words and saying something and, you know, letting off steam, you know, through lyrics. I just love it. So yeah, I mean, I'm going to be listening to more of it, and I've just started getting into it. But I've not been a long-term rap listener. No.
That was really good, though.
Yeah. Oh, cheers. Thanks. Great. Are you a musician too? Yeah?
I'm just a drummer. Yeah. Actually,
oh, you're a drummer.
Yeah.
Right. Come on, give us a question. We've had 50% of the audience giving us questions already. It's
that's a
fantastic
good
success rate.
See, that's how you do survey results.
Yeah. It'll look good on paper.
Do you want to just say a little about what they're going to see this afternoon? And
yeah, it's totally different.
No me for a start, which is a good thing.
Nah, he's brilliant, isn't he? No.
Don't ask him that.
No, it's totally different. It's a. We mentioned the medieval project, the Chaucer thing. It was a wacky rock and roll thing originally, very much based on the language. But now I decided to just simplify it, turn it into a one-man show of doing just one of the Canterbury Tales. There was loads when they went on the pilgrimage in 1380 or whatever it was. There was probably about 25 in all, different occupations, even though he died before he could finish his whole book. But different occupations, and one of them was a miller, who was a bit of a crude, brusque fellow who insisted on telling the next story after they drew lots in this pub in South London and who'd go first, and it was the knight who went first. And then the host who was leading the procession, who was leading the stories, actually wanted the monk to go next, but the miller butted in and insisted he go next. And then the host says, well, you're a bit of you're a lower caste, if you like. We don't want you now. We want something a bit more eyebrow, somebody who can read and write. And he asked the monk. But then the miller ended up having a real argument. There was probably fisticuffs or whatever, but eventually he got his story in. And it's like it's very bawdy. It's a lot of fun. It reminds me of kind of carry on films. You know, it's got it. I really like about it, and I like about 2 or 3 of the Chaucer stories, is that they show us that human humour just hasn't changed. You know, people have just have been bawdy, rude, quick-witted, and nothing has changed. You know, our advancement in society has not changed that. You've just got this basic people, and their senses of humour has just like remained the same, and I just think that's lovely. Come along and hear the story. I'm not going to tell you about the story really, but I mean, it's got songs. It's got songs in it. Yeah. What I've done is actually it's got some mostly Bob Dylan songs, because I change it around all the time, but presently it's The Miller's Tale by Geoffrey Chaucer with the songs of Bob Dylan and a few other people. It's got it's got a bit of T-Rex, bit of AC/DC. The Odd Thing comes in there, and various things come in there. But that's basically what it is. And the actual idea for doing it on my own was actually I saw a Tommy Cooper. Do you remember? It's a bit before your time, but Tommy Cooper. He always used to wear a fez. He made a living out of making magic tricks go wrong. No, you're not. And he had this catchphrase just like that. And he always used to mess around. Glass, bottle, bottle, glass. And the tricks used to go wrong. And he was extremely charismatic and very funny, wasn't he? He was just like, it was. Google him, Tommy Cooper, and you'll know all about him. You know about him, don't you?
Yeah, my
but
nan used to work with him.
She did.
Did she?
Yeah.
But he used to have this trick of telling that, and I found out a few people still do it. That's amazing, that, isn't it?
It is. Only for 2 years, and this little fact just suddenly emerges. That's astonishing.
Well, that's funny because I've just found out that the connection with Tommy Cooper is that Tommy Cooper used to do this hat trick where he'd tell a story, and he'd have this box, and he'd make it all go wrong. So he'd be fumbling around with this tea chest full of these hats, and he'd be sort of putting the wrong hats on, and he would be talking to the audience, and things would be going wrong, and he'd just tell a quick story. But apparently it was what they call an old music hall gag, wasn't it, of telling a story, and so that's where I thought that's great. So I looked on some music hall things, and that's what it's going to be. So every time I say something, you put on a different hat, and it moves very quickly, and it's just a bit of a laugh. But I was telling people about music hall the other day about this, and my sister was with us, and she suddenly says, "Well, your grandmother was a music hall singer," and I didn't know it. It's just really funny. Matilda May Aycliffe, she was a music hall singer in Leicestershire, and in Leicester, because the music hall was just massive, wasn't it? Between what would you say? Between the wars. Earlier,
well, it
turn of the
started
century,
in the 1890s and ran right. I mean, it was still on TV on the good old days in the 70s.
Yeah, and then television killed it. So it was basically everyone, and they could pack a theatre, couldn't they, with 3 times a day.
Yeah,
and it's where everybody went.
And we have still existing in Leeds a music hall on the Hedgerows, a music hall called City Varieties, which has been closed for about a year because they've been restoring it. But that is a proper music hall, and it looks like it used to look. And
that's where they did the good old days from, isn't it? Yeah, yeah.
And it's a good, it's a good place to go to. If you see somebody that you might like to see, like a comedian or somebody, it's a good place to see them because it's a different sort of atmosphere.
I used to go all the time. She used to have a monthly comedy thing there, but then she got down.
Well, that's starting up again.
So what's your connection again to?
My nana used to work with him.
Did she?
Yeah.
In what capacity would you?
Really don't know, but like I think she had one of his fezzes at one point.
Really?
Yeah, but then that sort of went, I think, along with my pad's pirate gun. Yeah, quite like really expensive stuff, and I just got rid of it.
Tommy Cooper's fez on eBay would fetch an absolute fortune.
It would, yeah.
And you better just explain why you're doing the show here and filming it.
Filming it, well, I need a bit of a promo for it, and because you just, it'd be great to have good quality cameras. Is that what you asked? What was?
Well, the thing is that.
Remind me why.
What Pete was saying about anybody can make a CD in their bedroom. Nowadays, if you want to get booked to appear anywhere, they won't just accept that you've got a reputation, you've got good reviews, or
yes.
You say what you do. They actually want to see, a good quality recording of what you do. And
so many people are I'm writing to people saying, "Can I come and do the Miller's Tale at your comedy thing or your storytelling, whatever?" And they're saying, "Oh, it sounds great, very interesting. Please send us. Have you got anything up on YouTube? Have you got anything up on da 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 da?" And I go, "No." So, hence the reason for being here. And
remember that working
right
freelance unit, and the thing you're actually doing, putting your demo disc together. Right? That, if you want to go work in radio, that's what they will ask for. It's an expectation, and that without that you haven't even got a foot in the door anymore.
Yeah, and I mean that's what everyone's having to learn. People who have done it for years and not had to do that are having to go on this really sort of acute learning curve. Whereas you're the generation in which you start with that from the beginning. So that's you're lucky.
There's it's probably Britain's most famous folk singer, a chap called Martin Carthy, who's been around for years and taught lots of people, famous people, their songs. He's 70. He was 70 last month. You know this new folk scene that's just emerged with all these young kids. And Martin asked about appearing at one of these clubs because he thought it'd be quite nice to, and they said to him, "Have you got any recordings you could send us?" So he sent them his entire back catalogue with a suggestion they raffle them to get money for the club. And his entire back catalogue is 35 albums.
Yeah.
Which is
amazing.
You know, so it's almost an automatic question now. It's the, do you want fries with that question that you ask if somebody comes for a job. Anyway, we're going to have some lunch. Naomi's coming this afternoon.
So yes, you will be.
Hopefully somebody will have found out what's happened to the first year video students. Thank you to the people who've been filming.
Thank you.
And hope it's been enjoyable for you. And the people in the other room who can hear us but we can't see them.